There may be no more blatant conflict of interest, objectively, that we have seen in the first year and a half than what we just witnessed inside of that White House. At least two of those crypto companies gave millions of dollars to his ballroom. But let's also be clear, three of the companies whose CEOs were represented behind Donald Trump there today that he invited into the Oval Office, they had lawsuits against them for fraudulently manipulating the crypto market and for running illegal securities exchanges. Those were lawsuits brought by the Biden administration. And as soon as Donald Trump's SEC came in, they dropped those charges. Those companies are now standing in the Oval Office with Donald Trump as he profits from crypto. It's right there for all of us to see.
It's really crazy. Kimberly, I don't really know what the crypto is. Okay, yeah. It's the Bitcoin, it's the meme coins, it's the coins. I don't know. People buying digital paintings and then they say it's a coin. This is not a story about Bitcoin and the industry. This is a story about who is the president beholden to?
Right.
Who holds the keys? Is it the American people or these companies and corporations that keep getting trotted through the White House and that are padding the pockets of the president and his family?
So this is a story, and I'm glad you put it that way because you don't have to understand crypto.
Because I don't, child. I was Googling today like,
what's going on in here? What's going on is corruption. What Donald Trump is doing is wrong in so many ways. First of all, there is something in the Constitution called the Emoluments Clause, which prohibits a president from benefiting financially from foreign interests or domestic interests. So
check one.
Right. So in the company that he co-founded, do you know who else is an investor in there? UAE entities that are tied to the Royal Prince in the United Arab Emirates. Do you know who also is a co-founder? Someone named Zach Witkoff, who just happens to be the son of Steve Witkoff, who was Donald Trump's Middle Eastern diplomat. So you put those pieces together and you tell me that that is not a grift in plain sight. Also, the problem here is Donald Trump essentially is trying to create a bank, a crypto bank, push the law that governs the bank, and then pick all the regulators who regulate the bank so that he can make money. But you know who's losing money, who's already lost money on his Bitcoins and memes and stuff?
The people that bought into it.
The people who bought into it while he made billions, they lost collectively billions on those because that little token is worthless. So people are already being harmed by this. And last point that I'll make is when I was seeing all of this happen, the one thing that I thought was I hope the Supreme Court is watching with respect to Lisa Cook and the Federal Reserve. Because imagine, you see what Donald Trump is doing here with this crypto gambit. Imagine if he were able, it's exactly what he's trying to do to the National Bank of the United States of America. He's trying to do that to the Federal Reserve, pushing off all the people that he doesn't like, installing his own sycophants so that he can be in charge. And that affects everybody. That affects your pension. That affects your interest rate. That affects your mortgage. So I hope the Supreme Court is watching as the Lisa Cook case makes its way back, because they only stopped him temporarily from firing her. Once it makes it back to the court, I hope they see very clearly what the danger is there for every single American.
Kimberly, can you explain, if we want to see who are the crypto cops, who would they be in the federal government? Yeah. I think it's important to note that there were two other individuals that were inside of that room today with Donald Trump as he had all those crypto CEOs behind him. And that was the current head of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then the current head of the CFTC. These are the folks that are supposed to be in charge of regulating the commodities. What does it say to you when you see them standing next to the CEOs of these crypto companies?
What that says to me is in plain sight the problem with the unitary executive theory that the Supreme Court has embraced, that said basically Donald Trump is in charge of the entire executive and he gets to pick who is in it, what they do, and the buck ultimately stops with him. These used to operate as independent regulators, first of all, people who had deep expertise in banking, in finance. In that, the big controversy used to be when people on the SEC used to work for Citibank or something, because that was, but at least they understood how banking worked. These are friends of Donald Trump. He puts in people who are going to say yes to him. And that is such a major problem. Also, it highlights the fact that presidents before Donald Trump put their own investments into trusts where they could not get to them. They didn't know what was going on. Here, Donald Trump just said, my sons are doing it. I'm not in it. Well, he's very much in this, and he's not even trying to hide the fact that he has an interest in these companies. He's sort of celebrating it as something great. So all the systems, all the levers that were in place have all broken down.
So I actually think that this is a case where it would have been hard to have necessarily predicted that that the Trump family, so to speak, would become so interested in crypto, given that previously Trump hadn't been. And all of this happened in the fall of the election cycle 2024. The Biden administration had focused on enforcement, and there was no regulation. And so now there's this Clarity Act that is before Congress, and it's going to get a vote in probably mid-September, but it doesn't look very likely that any regulation is going to happen. Does it?
Yeah, no. Who would be surprised by that? The only thing I disagree with what you just said is that we could not have seen this coming. Yeah. Donald Trump, from the beginning, has seen every rule, every regulation, every sort of system of safeguards put into place as something that are obstacles in his way to get what he wants. The first term, some of those guardrails held. This term, they are falling one after another. And we're seeing that even Congress, which is supposed to be a guardrail, remember, separation of powers, checks and balances, are no longer a guardrail there either. I mean, this is really, I can't think of something bigger than this in terms of flouting the Constitution, flouting the law, and just the pure grift of it.
Well, I mean, we can put a couple things on the table, but I think to your point, this is exposing the problem with having norms versus actual rules. Yes. And there are many things. When I went to work at the White House, I was surprised by how much of it is just made up. It's just the people in the room deciding this is what we're going to do. And then maybe there's some career people who will be like, perhaps we can do it a different way. Maybe not. Maybe somebody's like, nope, this is what the president wants. This is what the vice president wants. Can we make it happen? It's all just made up. And there are very few rules. There are a lot of rules that say how much money you can make when you work at the White House. If you're a staff person, there are rules. I feel like that's about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, am I wrong?
It's a general right or wrong.
It's a
just
general
people know what is right versus wrong.
Not even just knowing what's right and what's wrong.
Over the $20 lunch. You weren't supposed to go out and eat a meal with anyone and let them pay. It used to be $20 back in the day.
Now it's 40. Now it's 40.
Yes.
But at least that is not a law. Yeah. That's just an understood rule. It's a policy that if you violated it, to be honest, the ethics folks at the White House, it's not enforceable, okay? And I think that's what Donald Trump is exposing here. This second administration, remember, they learned from the first administration. So now they've seen how all these things work, and they're exploiting the loopholes that they realized that were there. Do I have that right?
Yeah. And you know what? Here's one guardrail that was in place for other presidents and not with Donald Trump. There used to be, with presidents, if it was found out that people in their administration were flouting these rules, it would look bad. They would not like the condemnation from the American people. Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't seem to care at all, given that he said out loud he doesn't care that Americans are struggling with affordability and being able to pay their bills and fill their tanks. He said that affordability is a hoax. He's, says he doesn't care about the war. He doesn't seem to care what the public thinks as long as he is focused on his monuments, his ballroom, and his grift. So that was a big guardrail. Integrity.